This aircraft, though it was an old design and obsolete even before World War II broke out, served all through the war, and despite being a slow and fragile biplane, it participated in some of the most well-known engagements. Today we will talk about the history of the Fairey Swordfish. In the late 1920s, early 1930s, the British Fleet Air Arm operated several types of aircraft for different roles. The naval fighter, spotter reconnaissance aircraft, and torpedo bomber were all separate types, making things unnecessarily complicated. The plan to change that was already in motion when they put out two new specifications in 1930. The M130 specification asked for a new torpedo bomber, and the S930 for a new reconnaissance torpedo bomber aircraft. Fairey by this time already worked on an aircraft for the Greeks, because they asked for a replacement for the old Fairey 3s. This new design in most features already fit the new specifications, and it was submitted to the Air Ministry in 1933. Originally it was planned to use the Rolls-Royce Kestrel engine, but after the Air Ministry agreed to order a prototype, they requested to change the power plant for an Armstrong Panther air-cooled radial engine. The TSR-1 prototype made its maiden flight in March 1933. Not long after the first flight, the Air Ministry notified Fairey that they will release new specifications again, to combine the earlier M130 and S930 requirements. This was the specification S1533. Since the new specification was a combination of the two former ones, the Fairey design already fitted in almost every aspect. Only a few modifications were needed, which included a new 635 horsepower Bristol Pegasus engine, a ressort hook on the back, and other small changes. Most importantly, the plane only had a maximum weight of 7,500 pounds, which was optimal as the ship catapults of that time were usually rated at 8,000 pounds. That said, the plane had such low stall speed that in favorable conditions they could take off from a carrier without using a catapult. The Fairey design was not the only one in this competition. Other companies entered their aircraft for the specification as well. Gloucester their TSR-38, and Blackburn the Shark model. The Gloucester design made it to carrier trials, but after that it was dropped and the development ceased. The Blackburn Shark entered service, and some of them were used in World War II, even though they were gradually replaced by the Fairey Swordfish, which was the most successful of the three competing designs. The first flight of the new modified Fairey plane happened in July 1933. The test flights went well and the type showed very good performance, but in September the prototype was lost in a crash when it couldn't recover during a spin test. Luckily the pilot managed to bail out, but the plane was destroyed. The second prototype, the TSR-2, was ready in April 1934, and it featured a number of changes. The modifications included a longer fuselage. Because of that, 4-degree sweep was introduced on the wings to keep the center of gravity, and a stronger 690 horsepower Pegasus 3 M3 engine. This new model made its maiden flight the same month, and the test flights continued all year, up until February 1935, when the prototype crashed during service trials and needed extensive rebuild. By this time the Air Ministry was convinced by the type, and initially 3 pre-production aircraft were ordered, and the type received the Swordfish name. The last of these 3 aircraft was built as a float plane and completed service trials to test its characteristics with floats. As by design, all Swordfish could be converted to use floats if needed. In January 1936, by the time the TSR-2 prototype was rebuilt, production orders were awarded to the type. First for 86 units, then almost immediately for another 131. The first production models were completed soon, and the type entered service in July the same year. However, it quickly became obvious that Fairey didn't have enough manufacturing capacity, as they had their hands full with their other types, like the Albacore, the Barracuda, and the Firefly. The Admiralty approached Blackburn to build the type as well, and the work at Blackburn's new factory commenced in 1940, and the type was in production until 1944. The Swordfish 1 was the first production series featuring the 690 horsepower Pegasus 3 engines. 992 units were built. The following Swordfish 2 featured the new, more powerful Pegasus 30 engines, producing 750 horsepower. And they had reinforced wings with metal skin surface, so they could carry rockets. 1080 Mark IIs were built. The Swordfish 3 was similar to the second variant, but featured the Mark X air-to-surface radar. 320 units were made from this version. The last variant was the Swordfish 4 with an enclosed cockpit. These were actually Mark II models sent over to Canada, and the cockpit was modified against the harsh Canadian weather. Despite the looks, the Swordfish was not a small plane. It was 35 feet 8 inches long, with a wingspan of 45 feet 6 inches. It had an empty weight of 4,195 pounds and a maximum takeoff weight of 7,580 pounds. It was powered by the Bristol Pegasus 3 engine, producing 690 horsepower. With this power plant, it could reach a maximum speed of 154 miles an hour and a cruise speed of 104 miles an hour. The plane had a range of 522 miles and a service ceiling of 16,500 feet. Its armament consisted of one forward-firing 7.7mm machine gun and another 7.7mm machine gun in the rear. It could carry either one 1,600-pound torpedo, or 1,500-pound sea mine, or 1,500 pounds of bombs. Beginning with the Mark II models, 8 rockets could be fitted under the wings. The Swordfish entered service in 1936, and by the time World War II broke out, the Fleet Air Arm had 13 squadrons using the type. They first saw combat in the Norwegian campaign in April 1940, where they scored a torpedo hit on a German destroyer, and later one of them managed to destroy a German submarine with bombs. This was the first U-boat destroyed by the Fleet Air Arm in the war. They flew missions against German ships and ground targets until the end of the campaign, on top of the usual anti-submarine patrol and reconnaissance missions. They also participated in combat over the Mediterranean from June 1940, where they flew a bombing mission from France to Italy, then they were relocated to Malta. In the next month they participated in the British attack on Mers el-Kabir, against the anchored French fleet. The British sent a force to invite the French to join the Allies, but if they were to decline the offer, the orders were to destroy the French ships, to prevent them getting into the hands of the Germans. They also flew successful missions from Malta against the Axis convoys, and managed to sink 50,000 tons of shipping monthly on average, despite their low numbers. Though the Swordfish was slow and weakly armed, with good planning they usually reached their targets under the cover of darkness, and avoided German fighters. In November the same year, they participated in the raid on Taranto harbor against the Italian fleet. They managed to sink or damage 3 battleships, heavily damaged 2 cruisers and 2 destroyers, and damaged other ships as well. In exchange they only lost 2 aircraft. Apparently the information of the attack on Taranto harbor was sent back to Japan by their Italian ambassador, and this information was later used on the attack on Pearl Harbor. But of course their most famous action happened on the North Sea in May 1941, when a torpedo from a Swordfish damaged the rudder on the Bismarck during the chase, resulting in its demise as it wasn't able to get away from the pursuing Royal Navy ships. By 1942 newer designs, like the Fairey Barracuda, started to take the place of the old Swordfish. In February this year, when 2 German battleships, the Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, accompanied by the Prinz Eugen heavy cruiser, broke out from Brest Harbor to the Atlantic, 6 Swordfish were sent on a torpedo run against them, and they were all destroyed without scoring a single hit, as they were helpless against the German fighter planes. This was the last use of the type as a torpedo bomber. The old biplane still found a role to be useful, as they were used as anti-submarine aircraft on the Atlantic, flying from escort carriers or from so-called chem and mech ships. They were quite successful in this role, making good use of their air-to-surface radar. Though at that time it spent almost 10 years in service, the old plane soldiered on until the end of the war, and their last operational squadron was disbanded in May 1945. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please leave a like, subscribe to my channel, and in the comments let me know if there's any interesting events or vehicles you'd like to see.